How do you envisage the deeply democratic management to come about? And I see a lot of hurdles that might come to it.
Absolutely. But so I'll give you a very small example, right? We were commissioned by the Karnataka Knowledge Commission to form this task group, and Joy was part of one of the subgroups and so on. Himanshu Kulkarni was part of the task group. And we spent a good year and a half writing what we knew was a draft water policy for the state. The state had not given any commitments that they would actually adopt that whatever we wrote, but the hope was that they would at least adopt some of those ideas. So one of the things we said in that discussion was that really we cannot expect the state to implement this stuff or even adopt the policy for namesake unless there is a groundswell of pressure from below, people demanding that it be taken up, right? Otherwise, it would end up on some shelf in Vidhan Sabha or whatever. So we said that part of the Knowledge Commission's job should be not just submitting a report to the state government, but actually disseminating the report in Kannada and through audiovisual media across the state through a variety of mechanisms. All the way down to street plays or whatever, to really try to take these issues, this basic understanding to people. But the Knowledge Commission refused. It said our job is to submit the report to the government in English. End of story. So that's where the report is today. It's been taken to the cabinet, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe 50% of the recommendations might get cherry picked and put in a draft policy, which again, policy is a statement of intent. For it to translate on the ground requires a huge amount of, again, that same groundswell of effort. So I personally feel that unless lay people and scientists, educators, whoever who's concerned about water really engage with these ideas ourselves and consider this not something that is going to magically happen through the state apparatus, but it's something that we'll have to force upon the state apparatus by working horizontally at the grassroots to build that groundswell of even just understanding that why check dams are not more than a temporary solution. Just that one simple thing, right? Because even today we have got some really dedicated people, Pani Foundation, you name it, who believe that, check damming the entire landscape will solve all problems. Yes, might solve some problems, but we need to think about the integrated picture, the hydrology, the social implications of check dams and so on and so forth. So I think that if we can just keep working on building that awareness, and it's not an awareness in a neutral science sense, it's obviously value loaded in what we believe as equitable sharing of water or the principles of sustainable water management or whatever it is, right? But we need to keep sharing that because I think people don't even know most of what we are talking about right now. So there's a limited number of us perhaps, but there are people here who worked for 40 years and they haven't given up. So hopefully we can expand that number and keep working.
Yes. So, as part of your study, it's a complex project, but could you attribute how much percentage of that evapotranspiration or what is going away is through, say, this particular case of eucalyptus?
Yes.
And then maybe recommend any policy measures, say taxing it more or the property in which it is being grown has an enhanced property tax. I don't know, some way to discourage.
So the first part is easier. The hydrological attribution and calculations. So our estimate was about 40% of the decline is because of eucalyptus, right? And about 60% is because of groundwater pumping in tandem with check damming. Check damming diverts the water to groundwater. If you didn't pump, it would have come back as base flow, but you're pumping that out also. So 60% of it is because of this combination of groundwater pumping and check dam. Okay. Now the question is, how do you regulate either of those, eucalyptus? So actually some activist groups in Karnataka, in Bangalore, took up this issue, fought with the forest department, which is a big champion of eucalyptus, fought with the agriculture department also, and actually got the government to issue a ban on eucalyptus planting. But if you read the fine print, it says no more eucalyptus planting. So, which means first of all, it's for the next farmer who's going to say, "Maine kya bigada? If everybody else has done it, why can't I do it?" And the possibility of enforcing that ban is zero, because it's all on private property. So there's no easy way of, and there is no significant tax anyway on private agricultural land. So the idea of enhancing property tax is a very long shot. So those are the challenges we face, and we have to figure out ways of ensuring. So there are farmers who are really worried about eucalyptus, but they say, like, what is my alternative? What crop can you suggest that I can have which is reasonably similar in income, but at the same time less water consuming, right? And we haven't really gotten easy answers for them. It's not that simple. We are saying that the problem should be looked at other way, which is how much water does this village own, let's say, having some downstream commitments and so on. How much water can the village utilize? And if it is a village utilizing all that evapotranspiration allocated to it, then who is utilizing it today and how should it be redistributed? If you just ask that question, then you might find that the individual farmer's allocation of evapotranspiration allowance is so low that they can't be doing eucalyptus or they can't be doing heavily irrigated farming, right? So I am thinking that social pressure on saying that this is, you are dipping into a common pool resource, it's a public resource, and therefore you are accountable to everybody else, and your allowance has to be part of a socially agreed upon allowance or a right to water, is perhaps the other way to approach that problem. It's not going to be easy. These are the powerful farmers. So
you also mentioned paddy, which is, we all know it takes a lot of water to cultivate. And you mentioned things like how jowar and ragi, they take comparatively less water, and that can be an alternative. Isn't that something which can potentially change even like the diets of people? I mean, is that something which people will accept?
So it's interesting, right? Because all the doctors are saying you better to eat ragi than eat white rice, right? So there's in theory a win-win-win. You win for the health of the consumer, win for the producer who can perhaps have less input intensive crops like ragi and jowar, and if you give them good MSP, and a win for water by saving water, right? But getting that message across in a country where the idea of eating white rice is so deeply hammered into you culturally. Brahmins eat white rice, non-Brahmins eat ragi. So the non-Brahmins aspire to then eat white rice because that's a way of showing your upward mobility and so on and so forth. I mean, the cultural messaging about rice is so deep. We'll have to work very hard. Bringing in the health issues and so on. Sorry, Meera.
One, you said that the forest department promotes eucalyptus.
Yes.
That to me, I want to understand why. I mean, the problems of eucalyptus have been, when I was half my age and we were talking about eucalyptus back then. I mean, why is it that the forest department promotes it? I can understand why private farmers want it, but and what do the private farmers grow it for? For paper production?
Paper pulp, rayon, and yeah. So it's an input feedstock for rayon and also fiber basically, right? So rayon and paper. So a lot of farmers have contracts tied with whatever paper mills and so on.
But forest departments have been promoting this.
So they started. So now if you ask them, they'll say no. Abhi to humne bahut kam kar diya eucalyptus, right? Because we're doing acacia auricularis, a different exotic, also highly water consuming, but more suitable to wet sort of high rainfall areas and so on. So you can understand within their rationality again why eucalyptus was attractive, because it grows fast and cattle cannot browse on it. Like cattle hate eucalyptus and acacia equally. So it's a cattle proof, not much fencing required kind of crop, right? And so safe. Yeah, but it's more expensive. So again, it comes to the question of who owns the water. As long as water is free to whoever can plant eucalyptus in their backyard and grab that water before anybody else does, that's what they're going to do. So that eucalyptus is really cheap. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not necessarily tracking all the hands.
Sir, my question is about rainwater harvesting system. So it also reduces the surface runoff. But so after this talk, I want to ask a question: is it bad or good? Like it has bad sides, like
yes. So the answer is yes to both, because again, it's not a panacea, right? In the sense, if you are talking about rooftop rainwater harvesting, so rainwater harvesting comes in many variants and many scales. So rooftop rainwater harvesting is often seen as a panacea, but even for purely domestic requirements, you need a big house and a massive sump before you can meet anywhere close to your requirement, right? So I'll give you my own personal example. We have 800 square feet of roof area, and we have built a biggest sump, so it's 10,000 liters, and I'm able to capture about 3 months. I'm able to go off grid for 3 months in a year. Okay, but that's because I was able to invest. I had the means to invest in all that, and I have big house by any definition, right? So the common man may not be able to do it in an apartment with 200 flats. how much rooftop area per person do you have, or per apartment do you have, and then how big a sump will you need to store all the water for feeding all those 200 apartments. So it's part of the solution, but a small part of the solution, and it can, meet needs in particular contexts is what I would say. And if you scale it up and talk about, for example, the other version of rooftop rainwater harvesting is actually rooftop to recharge well, okay, which means you don't get the water, you don't know where it's going, people are anyway pumping groundwater like crazy, so you're not solving the problem by augmenting that unless you've also addressed the pumping issue, right? And in a place like Bangalore, you're not even sure that you're doing anything useful, because the recharge goes into the shallow aquifer, but people's borewells are at 600 feet. They are, pumping from the granitic aquifer, which may or may not get recharged by this shallow aquifer recharge. So there are more complexities there. Yeah.
So as we all are aware of the alarming situation regarding all environment issues and all that. So as a researcher, you and maybe some of us can make government aware of something that may be very alarming after 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And let them make, these are the problems, these are the basic rules, and you should be taking, government should be taking proper responsible action over it. Otherwise, when situation will come, we have already allowed you, we have already made you aware of these things. Maybe something will happen, not immediately, but after 10, 15 years, when they will track the path where we are going, and I think something will happen.
So that's one model of functioning, but that sort of assumes a benign government, maybe blundering around ignorantly and kind of waiting for our inputs, which may occasionally be true, that they may not be clued into something that's going on. But a lot of it is also the structure of government, right? The bureaucracy, the technocracy, which are the engineering departments, the political side of the government, and the fact that ultimately, who is government but us? Who is that nasty farmer growing sugarcane but us? I'm either eating the sugar or growing the sugar or both, right? I'm eating the paddy or the rice that's coming from the paddy farm. So we are also complicit in this whole story. And so I think we need to work at all those levels, of which government might be one. But really, again, as I said, unless you have a groundswell of change, it is nice to have a government behind you, because it has so much resource that it can deploy, whether it is a legal, changing the law, changing the allocation of finances and so on and so forth. So you have to push for that. You cannot hope to do that. Everybody will do rooftop rainwater harvesting and the drinking water problem is somehow going to be magically solved. Nahi hone wala. So we need both.
In the meantime, we can educate people in their local language.
Yes.
So it will be beneficial, but it will take some time, but I think it will be.
I agree. I saw a hand.
How seriously are people looking at desalination, and is it really running away from the problem? Like, even if it's technologically someday would be feasible, is it running away from, that is another way of getting seawater, not from the water cycle, but directly pumping it out?
Yes. So just to clarify, desal is already a reality. All of the Gulf lives on desal, right? Chennai has a 8 million liter per day desal plant. There are a couple of others coming up here and there. And the Chennai plant is actually supported by nuclear energy. So they say it's a carbon neutral we have. But the question is, what can desal contribute given the amount of energy that it requires? It might solve a problem, where there's acute domestic water scarcity. You might solve some local problem using desal. Can you visualize agriculture being fed by desal water? See, in terms of the fraction of water used, domestic is still far smaller than agriculture, right? We're talking about 70%, 80%, 90% in agriculture, 5% in industry, 5% in domestic. Something of that order, depending on where you are in the country. So that big chunk, which is evapotranspiration, which is growing food crops, non-food crops, tobacco, sugarcane is a borderline food crop. In sense, we would not die if we didn't have sugar in our chai or whatever. All of that is happening through irrigation, which cannot be fed by desal water, right? Which is on massive scale. Not to mention the transport costs of moving that water from the ocean back up the slope. So all I'm saying is that desal is already happening. It solves a small fraction, can solve domestic water needs, meet domestic water needs, like rooftop rainwater harvesting. It can solve a small slice of the problem in urban areas. But really, should we be focusing on that as a solution to the larger problem?
So it's energy intensive right now. Even if it becomes the technology grows so much that you don't need a lot of something like microchannels and segregation. Like not active but passive. So even at that point, it won't be a good thing.
I can't visualize a situation where you can really desalinate at the scale that we are talking about to address these kinds of problems.
All right, I
Sorry.
think, why don't you ask him
A woman?
after? I think we'll again stop.
A young woman student, if you don't mind. Some gender balance.
Yes, please.
What are the best sustainable irrigation options we have for our farmers if we want to stop on both directions?
So, as you know, one of the things that people have invested in and the government is pushing very hard is what is called micro irrigation, drip irrigation, where instead of flooding the whole land, you use small pipes to droplets of water fed to the plant exactly where the plant is and so on. So now, again, the big debate in the sector has been, is drip irrigation a panacea? And the answer is that it can't be a panacea for the simple reason that if you're a farmer in Kolar whose borewell is at 2,000 feet and you can barely pump out enough water to irrigate an acre or two of land with flood irrigation. Now you move to drip irrigation, you double the amount of, half the water used, which means you have double the acreage that you can do. You own 5 acres anyway. So you are going to expand the area under irrigation, not say ki mere 1 acre, I'll stay at 1 acre and give that water to somebody else, right? So in an area where it's not land limited but water limited, it will not bring down total water use. It will improve efficiency of water use, but not bring down total water use. In an area like UP, perhaps, where it's land limited, because like everything is irrigated in a sense, it might bring down total water use. The question is then who will grab that surplus water? Will it go to industry? Or will it go to domestic? Will it go to the neediest? Or will it go to somebody else? So we still have to answer those questions. But yeah, it can be part of the solution, for sure.
I think we'll stop. You can talk to him afterwards. So thank you again. And let me invite Dr. Meera Nanda to hand over a small gift